Hey y'all, it's your boy John Atala. Welcome to episode 5 of the Big Boy Basics. Now I know I said last time we were going to cover reps, sets, volume, and rep ranges. I actually lied. I thought of a better order. It'd be better to cover how hard should you train, RPE and RIR first before we dive into that. So we are switching the order. Now the typical disclaimer. How hard you train depends on many factors and really depends on what you're going for. So this is a simplified version of this topic just to get you guys started. Understand there are more nuances than this than I present, but it's going to get you guys in the gym, get going, and really just get you started to build muscle. And as typical, this series is with my own personal style of training and my own biases, but I found this works for me and many of the people I train. So let's start with RPE. You hear this very often. RPE is rate of perceived exertion. So it's basically saying, how hard are you training? And there's another tool called RIR, which is reps and reserve. And often you hear these used synonymously. They're very similar tools, but they have a slight different nuance. If you use the numbers incorrectly, they will mean very different things with RPE versus RIR. So let's get into comparing the two. Now, thankfully for the internet, they had this amazing chart made up, so I did not make this. But on the left of your chart, you have RIR, and on the right, you have RPE. So RIR, reps and reserve. If we're doing maximal intensity effort, you will have 0 reps in reserve because you cannot do any more reps. If you're using RPE, rate of perceived exertion, that is rated 10 because it's your maximal effort. See the difference? If you said, I'm going to do an RPE set of 10 or RIR set of 10, those are meaning two very different things. RIR would mean you have 10 sets left in the tank. RPE would mean at maximal effort. So if you're explaining this, make sure you just say the right thing because it can mean two very different things. RPE can also be used for other sports, like sprinting. How hard are you going to sprint? Having reps in reserve for sprinting doesn't really make sense. It's more for lifting, but RPE, rate of perceived exertion, can be used for different things, right? I could have a RPE 10 maximal sprint and an RPE 7. It was kind of difficult, but not too bad, maximal sprint. So they do use different things. So let's look at some of my bench presses, and I'm going to rate them for my RPEs from what I remember. So this first example from my pause bench press a while ago, I'll rate this in RPE 9. I think I could have got one more rep paused because I did next week and it felt like that, but I don't think I would have been able to got 2. If I was using RIR, reps in reserve, I would have had an RIR of 1. I would have had 1 rep in reserve. Now for this next bench press, that was my maximal bench press, 315 that I got. And it was definitely an RPE 10. It was shaky. I would have definitely not have gotten another rep. So that'd be an RPE of 10. If I'm using RIR, that'd be a RIR of 0 because I do not have any reps in reserve. And then if I'm failing, I'm actually kind of breaking the scale because it's beyond maximal effort. I'm not able to do it. So now that you have a basic understanding of RPE or RIR, whatever system you decide to choose, how should you use these? From now on, guys, I'm just going to say RPE. I hope you get the idea, but that's just generally the system I use. It doesn't really matter. So generally, for most training, stick between 7 to 9 RPE or 1 to 3 RIR. For isolation lifts, I generally use 8 to 10 RPE along with machines. And the reason for that is you can recover generally well from these. If you're failing on a bicep curl and you went beyond maximal effort, it's not that big of a deal. But if I'm doing that every day with heavy squats, that's going to be a lot more taxing. And also with machines, you can do this. But generally, I start on the lower end, like an RPE of 8, and then slowly work my way up to an RPE of 10 or plus. Also with machines or isolations, you have a much lower risk of injury. If you're failing on a bicep curl, not a big deal. If you're failing on your squat every day and getting smashed with the weight and you don't have the safety bars on, a much higher risk of injury, so it's not recommended. Something to keep in mind though, training to failure is not necessary for muscle. Training to failure is not necessary for muscle growth. I don't train to failure that often. Sometimes I do if it's towards the end of my month and I'm testing AMRAPs. That's a good time for me to train to failure. But often I don't. Most of mine is in the 8 to 9 RPE range. Now for free weight, heavy compounds, I'd recommend a 7 to 9 RPE and rarely taking these to failure. I don't like taking any of these to failure because you have a higher chance of injury. I definitely injured my back doing this a while ago with my deadlifts. Also, you'll be super gassed if you're taking every set to true failure on a heavy squat. That would be absolutely brutal. I would not have any energy left in a workout if I did even 3 sets of super heavy squats to failure. It would just be nuts. It would be absolutely terrible. You want to keep a little in the tank on your compounds, 7 to 9 RPE, or 3 to 1 reps left in the tank, and then don't snap yourself up. Now, should you worry about RPE or RIR as a beginner? I say yes, because it will be a useful tool as you get more advanced to actually gauge where you're at in your difficulty. It's going to be hard to gauge in the beginning. You're not going to know exactly. I know mainly 2 types of people in the gym. Some who always think they have 1 more left in the tank, and I tell them to rack it, and then they fail next set because they don't understand how fatigued they are, or a person who underestimates how much they actually are. So if they think they're about to fail on their next rep, they usually can get like 5 or 6 more if I yell at them. There's usually these 2 types of people. So you need to understand where you're at on that. A way to do this is to learn what true failure feels like. It's okay to fail in the beginning. The weights aren't going to be that heavy, assuming you're a normal beginner and not like an elite lifter or just have crazy genetics. You'll be fine failing, and it's okay to fail, but learn where that failure was. Try to gauge what RPE or RIR you thought you were at when you failed, and you'll slowly learn and fine-tune these. Jeff Nippard also has a really good way to gauge this, and I'll put up that clip here.
I call this an RPE test set. So the next time you're doing an exercise that you can fail safely on, let's say an incline dumbbell press, once you get to a point where you think you could do 2 more reps, call it out. Say out loud, okay, I'm at an RPE 8 now, and then actually push it to failure to see if you rated it correctly.
Yep. Okay, I think that's RPE 8. Yep. One more, let's go. Yep. Yep, go.
If you could only get 2 reps, that means you're dead on with your RPE, but if you got 3 or 4 more reps, that means you're probably overestimating your RPE and you need to push it harder next time.
With more lifting experience, you'll become more in tune. You guys can see clips of my failed lifts, so I still overestimate sometimes, but that's okay. It's just all part of the journey. And then the quote for the video, "Eat More" by John Atala. I didn't actually say that, kind of, but thank you, John Marmaduke. The next video now, we're actually going to get into volume, sets, and reps, and you will see in my system later in the video how you just kind of auto-regulate using RIR or RPE, whatever term you decide to use. Make sure to click subscribe. Check out the playlist if you missed the other videos for the Big Boy Basics, and peace.